What if I told you the easiest vegetables you could ever grow are the ones nobody told you existed? Not hybrids engineered for supermarket shelves. Not varieties that need perfect soil, regular watering, and a spray schedule. Vegetables that fed families through wars, famines, and depressions without any of that. That thrived in poor soil because they evolved in poor soil. That come back every year without replanting. That pests largely ignore because modern pests have never learned to recognize them as food. Today, we are looking at 20 of them, and exactly why the seed catalog you are shopping from does not carry a single one. Stick around. Number 15 survived centuries of agricultural neglect by growing wild in the cracks of abandoned farmland and still produces more food per square foot than anything in a modern kitchen garden. And number 20 was the primary vegetable of an entire civilization for 2,000 years before it was replaced by something that requires 10 times the effort and produces half the nutrition. Hit subscribe. Here are 20 forgotten vegetables that grow like weeds with zero effort required, ranked from impressive to absolutely incredible. Number 1. Good King Henry, also called poor man's asparagus, also called the vegetable that never leaves. Chenopodium bonus henricus has been growing in European cottage gardens since before records were kept, so established in the domestic landscape that its presence around old settlements was used by archaeologists to identify sites of former habitation. Good King Henry is a perennial. Plant it once, and it returns every year. The young spring shoots blanch like asparagus, though the mature leaves cook like spinach with a richer, earthier flavor. It produces from early spring through late autumn across a season no annual matches. It tolerates shade, poor soil, drought, and indifferent gardening. Research has confirmed high concentrations of iron, calcium, and vitamins A and C, consistent with its use as a spring tonic after a winter of preserved provisions. Good King Henry disappeared when annual spinach and chard were more efficiently packaged. A perennial requiring no replanting has no seed sales after the first year. Think of it as the asparagus and spinach combination that shows up every spring without being asked, feeds you for months, and never sends a bill. Number 2. Skirret, the root vegetable that medieval Europe considered a luxury. Sium cisarum. Clusters of small white roots, tasting like carrot and parsnip with a sweetness that historical accounts describe as remarkable enough to serve at medieval feasts. Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded skirret as tribute from Germanic tribes. Skirret is a perennial. Plant it once, harvest some roots, leave the rest to multiply. It tolerates heavy clay soil, partial shade, and the neglect that would kill a carrot crop within weeks. Modern pests ignore it entirely. The roots can be roasted, boiled, mashed, or eaten raw. The flavor is distinctive enough that every gardener who grows it wonders why it is not in every kitchen garden. Skirret disappeared because the roots cluster irregularly, making commercial standardization impossible. Think of it as the root vegetable that Roman emperors considered worth demanding as tribute, growing in your worst clay soil with less work than a carrot requires. Number 3. Orach, also called mountain spinach, also called the heat-tolerant spinach that spinach itself could never be. Atriplex hortensis was the primary leafy green across Europe and Asia for centuries before spinach replaced it, not because Orach was inferior, but because spinach was more commercially tractable. Orach does not bolt in heat, making it categorically superior to spinach as a summer green. Spinach sown in April bolts by June. Orach sown at the same time is still producing leaves in August, self-seeding so reliably that a single planting creates a self-perpetuating colony. Red and golden varieties exist alongside the standard green, with leaves vivid enough that Orach is regularly planted as an ornamental by gardeners who have no idea it is edible. Orach disappeared when commercial spinach production created an abundant, cheap, familiar product that crowded out alternatives. A superior vegetable was replaced by a more marketable one. Think of it as the spinach that never bolts, never needs replanting, and produces leaves in colors that no conventional spinach has ever managed. Number 4. Scorzonera, also called black salsify, also called the oyster plant. The roots are black on the outside, white inside, and tastes distinctly of oysters and artichokes combined in a way that makes anyone who has never eaten Scorzonera question why they have been eating anything else. Leave some roots in the ground after harvest, and they produce leaves the second year. Then self-seed into a continuing population that manages itself. The roots function as a living larder through winter. A French haute cuisine incorporated Scorzonera as a standard vegetable through the 19th century. It appeared in every serious kitchen garden guide published before the Second World War. Then, commercial production eliminated everything that could not be standardized. Scorzonera grows in heavy clay soil with virtually no pest problems. A vegetable absent from mainstream cultivation long enough has fallen off the pest registry entirely. Think of it as the oyster of the vegetable kingdom, growing in your worst clay soil with no effort, tasting like something a French restaurant would charge 30 euros to serve. Number 5. Sea kale, Crambe maritima. The vegetable that grows on sea cliffs, in sand, in salt spray, in soil conditions so hostile that most plants cannot survive, and produces tender blanched shoots in early spring that chefs across Europe currently pay premium prices for at specialist markets, while most gardeners have never heard the plant's name. Sea kale is a perennial establishing in year 1, harvested lightly in year 2, and producing from a single crown for 20 years from year 3 onward. Cover the emerging crowns in late winter, and within weeks the shoots blanch pale and tender. The flavor is a cross between asparagus and hazelnuts. Victorian walled kitchen gardens grew sea kale as a luxury crop specifically for the premium it commanded from household kitchens. It was considered a mark of the serious kitchen gardener. Sea kale disappeared when the forcing and blanching technique fell out of domestic practice and commercial supply chains could not accommodate a crop requiring individual attention to each crown. Think of it as the premium restaurant vegetable that grows on sea cliffs for 20 years without any help, asking only for a bucket over its head for a few weeks each spring. Number 6. Hamburg parsley, also called root parsley, also called the vegetable that gives you 2 crops from one plant. Petroselinum crispum variety tuberosum produces large white roots, tasting like a combination of parsley and celeriac, alongside harvestable leaves throughout the growing season. Every square foot of soil it occupies produces both an herb and a root vegetable simultaneously. Colonial American kitchen gardens grew Hamburg parsley as a staple because the efficiency of a double-yield plant was understood by communities where every square foot mattered. The roots improve after frost, with cold triggering starch-to-sugar conversion. Hamburg parsley stores in the ground through winter and can be dug as needed through the coldest months. Hamburg parsley disappeared when the division of herbs and vegetables into separate commercial categories made a plant occupying both simultaneously impossible to position. Think of it as the plant that produces a herb harvest all summer and a root vegetable all winter from the same square foot of ground, having never heard of the distinction between the two categories. Number 7. Turkish rocket, Buneus orientalis, a perennial brassica, producing harvestable leaves from early spring through early summer, followed by edible flower buds that function as broccoli at exactly the point when cultivated broccoli has bolted and died. Turkish rocket is essentially indestructible once established. It spreads by both seed and root, colonizing difficult areas with the determination of a weed while producing food throughout. The leaves have a peppery, mustard-like flavor that softens considerably when cooked. The flower buds, harvested when tightly closed, steam or stir-fry identically to broccoli florets and taste indistinguishable from cultivated brassica. It has been growing wild across Central Asia and Southeastern Europe for centuries, used as a forage vegetable where conventional production was impractical. Turkish rocket disappeared from deliberate cultivation when the commercial brassica industry standardized around cultivated broccoli, cauliflower, and kale, creating a market for familiar forms that left no room for a perennial alternative producing equivalent food with no inputs. Think of it as the broccoli that plants itself, comes back every year, and grows best in the soil where your cultivated broccoli keeps failing. Number 8. Alexander's, Smyrnium olusatrum, the celery of the ancient world, used by Romans throughout their empire, growing wild in coastal British and European hedgerows near former settlement sites It literally outlived the civilizations that planted it. Alexander's produces every part edibly, leaves and stems as celery and parsley, flower buds as broccoli, seeds as spice, and roots as a cooked vegetable. A single plant across 5 food categories. It grows in coastal conditions, in partial shade, in the kind of chalky, thin, exposed soil where conventional vegetables cannot be established. It is biennial, self-seeding after flowering into a continuing colony that maintains itself indefinitely. Alexander's disappeared when cultivated celery replaced it. A plant that fed the Roman Empire was retired for something requiring more water, better soil, and regular attention. Think of it as the plant that has been growing wild in the hedgerows since the Romans left. Still edible, still productive, waiting for someone to remember it was ever a vegetable. Number 9. Welsh onion, Allium fistulosum. The perennial onion that never produces a bulb, but produces leaves and stems continuously, multiplying into ever larger clumps that fill the garden corner with a permanent, harvest-ready allium. Welsh onion has been cultivated across Asia and Europe for over 2,000 years. The primary onion of Japanese cooking, and a standard medieval European garden plant, because a year-round perennial allium was more useful than an annual. The hollow cylindrical leaves taste like mild onion, with a hint of chive, and can be harvested continuously. A clump planted once provides fresh greens indefinitely. Welsh onion disappeared from Western kitchen gardens when the annual bulbing onion became the standardized commercial product, and the distinction between onion types was collapsed into a single familiar form. A perennial that never stops producing was replaced by an annual requiring replanting every season. Think of it as the onion that produces every day of the year from a single planting, and has been doing so in Japanese kitchens for 2,000 years, while Western gardeners were rebuying onion sets every spring. Number 10. Malabar spinach, Bacella alba and Bacella rubra, a tropical climbing plant producing glossy leaves that taste exactly like spinach on a vine that thrives in the heat that causes conventional spinach to bolt. When your spinach gives up in July, Malabar spinach is just getting started. Malabar spinach has been cultivated across South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Africa for thousands of years as a standard leafy green, available through the hottest months when other greens are unavailable. The plant grows rapidly up any support, producing harvestable leaves from midsummer through autumn in temperate climates. The thick, mucilaginous texture makes the leaves useful as a natural thickener in soups. Malabar spinach disappeared when classified as a tropical crop, unsuitable for temperate growing. The container and season extension techniques that extend citrus in cool climates apply equally here. Think of it as the spinach that thrives in the conditions that kill spinach, arriving to fill the gap in the summer harvest calendar that every conventional kitchen garden has. If you are starting to see that the easiest vegetables you could ever grow are the ones nobody told you about, hit that like button right now. It helps this reach gardeners who are tired of fighting their soil, their weather, and their pests for a conventional harvest. And if you have not subscribed to Plantelligence yet, click that button and ring the bell. We are about to get to the ones that will genuinely transform what is possible in any garden, anywhere. Number 11, perennial kale. Brassica oleracea in its perennial forms, including Dobbinton's kale and sea kale tree, a kale plant that does not die at the end of the season. That comes back in spring with fresh growth from a thickening woody stem. That, over years, develops into a substantial shrub, producing harvestable leaves continuously across a growing season, dramatically longer than any annual kale can manage. Perennial kale was maintained in cottage gardens for centuries, passed between neighbors as cuttings, and harvested from plants older than the people eating them. The flavor is milder than annual kale and improves with repeated harvesting, which encourages continuous new growth rather than flowering. Perennial kale disappeared when the seed industry standardized around annual varieties sold every year. A vegetable propagated by cuttings and never repurchased has no place in a business model built on annual seed sales. Think of it as the kale plant that never dies, never bolts, and gets bigger and more productive every year while you keep harvesting from it. Number 12, sorrel, Rumex acetosa. the lemony perennial green that produces its first leaves while the ground is still cold, occupying an irreplaceable position in the seasonal food calendar of every household that grew it. French sorrel soup is still eaten in traditional households. Across Russian, Eastern European, and German culinary tradition, sorrel was the first fresh green of the year, available weeks before anything else in the kitchen garden. Sorrel tolerates any soil, a drought, partial shade, and heavy harvesting. Leaves are edible raw when young, cooked as a spinach substitute when older, and used as a souring agent in cooked dishes. Sorrel disappeared when imported greens removed the urgency of growing a native perennial. When supermarket salad was available in February, sorrel's value was invisible to a generation that had never experienced the absence it filled. Think of it as the green that arrives in March when nothing else will, asking only for the space to exist and the patience to wait for every other vegetable to catch up. Number 13, Cardoon. The giant thistle relative that grows 6 to 8 feet tall produces silver-gray foliage of such striking architectural presence that it is regularly used as an ornamental in formal gardens by people who have no idea it is also a vegetable, and provides an edible stem harvest in autumn that tastes like artichoke hearts crossed with celery. The edible part is the blanched inner stem, achieved by tying the outer leaves and excluding light for several weeks in autumn. The result is a pale, tender stem with a flavor so distinctive that Italian Christmas traditions in several regions center on it. In Argentina, Cardoon, introduced by Spanish settlers, naturalized so aggressively across the pampas that it became a defining feature of the landscape, covering hundreds of square kilometers as a declared invasive species. Cardoon disappeared when the blanching technique fell out of domestic practice. Think of it as the plant that takes over the pampas when nobody is watching and produces artichoke-flavored stems when somebody is. Number 14. Minutina, Plantago coronopus, also called Herba stella, a small star-shaped rosette producing narrow antler-like leaves with a mild peppery flavor, one of the most valued salad ingredients in traditional Italian kitchen garden culture. Minutina produces harvestable leaves through winter in most temperate climates and thrives in poor, stony soil. It self-seeds reliably, creating a self-maintaining colony. In the traditional Italian model, it was sown once and managed as a semi-wild garden resident. The leaves are used in mistacanza, the traditional Italian mixed salad that deliberately incorporated plants at the boundary between cultivated and wild. Modern salad mixes eliminated this complexity in favor of uniform, mild baby leaves. Minutina disappeared from British and North American kitchen gardens when the salad mix market was captured by commercial producers growing mild, fast, uniform baby leaf crops with no room for the distinctive flavors of traditional mixed salad ingredients. Think of it as the Italian winter salad leaf that grows itself in poor soil through the cold months when every other salad plant has given up. Number 15. Ground elder. Egopodium podagraria, also called goutweed, also called the most cursed plant in British gardening. Universally described as an unkillable invasive weed that spreads through underground rhizomes and cannot be eradicated without removing every trace of root from the soil. It is a nutritious, edible spring vegetable deliberately introduced to Britain by the Romans, growing in every garden where it established itself, producing a harvest that the people fighting it have been throwing away. The young leaves in spring, before the plant flowers, taste remarkably like a mild version of flat-leaf parsley with a hint of celery. They can be eaten raw in salads, cooked as a pot herb, or used in soups and stews as a green vegetable. The Roman name for it, Herba Egopodium, suggests it was grown with intention. The name goutweed comes from its documented medicinal use for gout across the medieval period. Ground elder disappeared from food use when reclassified as an invasive weed in English-speaking horticultural tradition. The knowledge that it was edible was lost in the process. The plant kept growing regardless. Think of it as the vegetable that has been surviving every attempt to remove it from your garden because it knows something about persistence that your cultivated vegetables do not. Number 16. Rampion, Campanula rapunculus. The vegetable Rapunzel was named after. In the Brothers Grimm story, a woman craves the rampion growing in the witch's garden so desperately that her husband steals it, triggering the entire narrative. The fairy tale preserves a documented observation. Rampion was valued highly enough to be worth stealing. The roots taste like a mild, sweet radish. The leaves serve as a salad green all season. It is biennial, producing root and leaf the first year and edible flowers the second, 3 harvests from a single planting. Traditional European kitchen gardens from the medieval period through the 19th century included Rampion as a standard component. It grew in partial shade, in the lean soil of cottage gardens, in the kind of conditions that conventional vegetables refuse. It required no fertilizer, no special attention, and no management beyond the initial sowing. Rampion disappeared when commercial radish and lettuce made its harvests redundant. A vegetable producing 2 food types from poor soil was replaced by 2 separate products each, requiring better conditions. Think of it as the vegetable that a fairy tale was written about, because stealing it seemed worth the consequences, still growing in the same conditions it always did. Number 17. Mashua, Tropiolum tuberosum. Orange and purple Andean tubers that were a staple alongside potatoes for thousands of years. The Spanish documented Mashua, when they arrived, took the potato to Europe and left it behind. Mashua is a perennial in its native range, and an annual where winters are cold, growing from stored tubers replanted in spring as potatoes are. The plant climbs vigorously, reaching several meters with support, produces ornamental red and orange flowers throughout summer, and forms tubers that can be harvested in quantity in autumn. The flavor is peppery and slightly bitter when raw, mellowing when cooked. The bitterness comes from compounds studied for antimicrobial and anti-tumor properties. Traditional Andean communities consumed a vegetable with documented biological activity for thousands of years before any researcher measured what was in it. Mashua disappeared when Spanish prioritization of the potato left everything else invisible for 500 years. Think of it as the vegetable the Spanish could have brought back alongside the potato and did not, leaving it unknown outside South America while the potato changed the world. Number 18. Otsa, Oxalis tuberosa, the second most important tuber crop of the Inca Empire after the potato. Tubers in vivid shades of pink, red, yellow, orange, and purple, tasting like a lemony potato when raw and sweet and nutty when cooked. A climbing plant producing one of the most visually striking harvests of any vegetable in the kitchen garden. A tray of multicolored tubers that look like Easter eggs rather than food. Oca has been cultivated in the Andes for over 8,000 years at altitudes where even potatoes struggle. Oca requires a long, cool autumn for tubers to develop. Row covers extend the season in climates with early hard frosts. Oca is almost completely unknown outside South America and New Zealand. The barrier is not growing difficulty. It is simply the absence of supply. Think of it as the potato's more colorful, more nutritious, older Andean cousin, still waiting for someone to introduce it properly to the rest of the world. Number 19. Ulluco, Ullucus tuberosus, producing tubers in vivid combinations of pink, purple, red, and orange with stripes and spots. The harvest looks like the contents of a jewelry box. The leaves are edible too, tasting like mild spinach. Ulluco has been cultivated in the high Andes for over 8,000 years in volcanic soil and temperature swings that would collapse most crops within days. It responds to ordinary temperate garden conditions as though they are a luxury. It produces tubers late in the season and requires the same long, cool autumn as Oca. Ulluco tubers do not brown when cut and store for months at cool room temperature, improving slightly in sweetness during storage. Ulluco never traveled beyond South America during the colonial period. The Spanish took the potato and left everything else as botanical footnotes that heritage growers are now attempting to reintroduce. Think of it as the jewel box that grew in volcanic soil at 4,000 meters for 8,000 years and still outperforms conventional vegetables in any garden patient enough to give it the season it needs. Number 20. Skirret and the medieval vegetable system. This is not a single vegetable. No, it is the principle that explains everything else on this list. Medieval European kitchen gardens operated on a logic entirely different from modern vegetable growing. Perennial vegetables were grown as permanent infrastructure alongside annuals. Good King Henry, Welsh onion, Scorzonera, sorrel, and sea kale held permanent positions, returning every year without replanting, requiring no seed purchase, feeding the household across seasons that annual crops could not cover. The annual vegetables, brassicas, beans, and roots were grown in the spaces between the perennial infrastructure. The perennials reduced the total labor and cost of the garden because they required no annual setup. The annuals produced the volume and variety that the perennials could not. Together, they created a system that was both productive and resilient, resistant to the crop failures that devastated pure annual vegetable gardens. This system disappeared when the industrial seed industry emerged in the 19th and 20th centuries and created economic incentives to favor annual vegetables that required annual seed purchases over perennial vegetables that required none. The medieval garden was not primitive. It was sophisticated in ways that the commercial food system had no interest in maintaining. Research has consistently found that mixed perennial and annual kitchen garden layouts outperform pure annual systems on every metric except commercial scalability. The system worked. It was replaced not because it failed, but because replacing it was profitable. Think of it as the garden design that fed European families for 1,000 years before the seed industry realized that a garden requiring no seed purchases was a business problem rather than a gardening solution. 20 vegetables. 1,000 years of productive, low-effort, self-sustaining kitchen gardening, available to anyone willing to plant what the seed catalog is not selling. If this changed how you think about what belongs in your garden, click the video on the left, because in that one, we look at the perennial food plants that build a garden which feeds you more generously every year without you doing more work. Subscribe to Plantelligence, and I will see you there. Now go find seeds for something nobody is trying to sell you.